turn your back on Mother Nature. Everybody wants to rule the world. It's my own design. It's my own rules. Help me to decide. Help me make the most of freedom and of pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule. There's a room where the light won't find you. Holding hands while the walls come tumbling down. They do, I'll be right behind you. So glad we've almost made it. So sad they had to fade it. Everybody wants to rule the world. Welcome to your life. I can't stand this indecision, married with a lack of vision. Everybody wants to rule. Say that you'll never, 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 never need it. Born if I believe it. Everybody wants to rule. Everybody wants to rule the world. Okay, that was my intro song for this stream. I thought it was pretty good. Thank you, Lie to Me, for explaining things to the rest of the class. Yes, I still have the strikes hanging out. I can stream from there, but I can't get hit from there. So I thought I would just do a stream to tell everybody to come over here. But I thought I had smarter friends. Oh, I'll take it down. Anyway, you guys make me laugh. So share out the stream if you're interested. I had uploaded some things, but I don't want to get too far away from them. So you might want to go and check them out later or hang out here and I'll go over them. But I was contemplating things that I'm, who knows why they come to me, but they do. And so I was looking up some things and having ideas. So I thought that I would take, I would blabber about the things I find interesting. Because why not? So I'm going to switch over to, not that one, it was this one. Yeah. So I'll say hi to everybody. Ooh. And, share out the stream if you don't mind. Tell everybody come over here and listen to this crazy woman tell us things that we've never thought about before. And if you like her, maybe you'll stick around. I'm going to do this. Okay, I'll have to change, I think. So is it in here? I need to find it. No, I know. Yeah, there it is. Okay. All right, I'm here. I know. You know I can't do that, Paul, any more than you can. Stay home, Paul. Come on. That's like asking, a wolf not to salivate the smell of meat. I mean, come on. We're only human after all. So it's really good to see everybody. I'll see Ulick was first today. Lai is my number 2 man. Mr. D, you popped in at number 3. Bobby is number 4. And Jay completes the 5th place. Nope. Bry, the 6th place. Paul, 7th. And we're here. And there's 8 of us. So someone hasn't checked in, but welcome everybody. Okay. So I'm going to be referring to this chart today in regard to the meaning of life. And, let's start with God. So as you can see here, I have taken the historical, epochs of time through our history, and I have superimposed them alongside the developmental stages of a human being. And I noticed a pattern when I did that. And so I have spent several years now presenting these patterns as I've come to figure them out and hit one at a time. It's something so very simple as to put these two things on top of each other, but seemingly almost impossible to get others to see as a very important part of what's going on, right? So that's what I'm attempting to do. So breaking them apart piece by piece. And as you can see here, we've got these periods in time. And now I need a better timeline, but just work with me here. And we're going to have, so here around, so most of us are pretty well familiar with the copper, iron, bronze ages. We're pretty well familiar with the beginning here in ancient times where we get, Rome and all of that. And then we're pretty familiar with the modern times, where we transitioned into, what we have today. So I think everyone is pretty comfortable sitting in this realm with me. So that's what I'm going to ask everyone to do. So if you'll notice that it is in that infant stage that we begin to babbling, and that's actually around the same time that we would have had the Tower of Babel. And I just recently learned something very interesting about bilingual languages, and that when the babbling stage is happening, the brain of the child, the brain is able to comprehend way more sounds that it actually ends up using. And so that's why a bilingual baby, they'll end up with, maybe being smarter or more intuitive in certain ways, because at a developmental stage in the brain, their ability to hear multiple of sounds, it unlocks other places within the mind. So that shows right there. So when we have the Tower of Babel where our language split, I can't help but notice these similarities. That happens to be the same time that a human baby's brain is developing these understandings of different sounds and languages. It seems like a story in the myths that give us an answer to why we started, the Tower of Babel was there. This is why, because it's a physical, it like in a movie, it would be something in the peripheral that has a statement of this is what this means. It's a 3D type symbol, right? So that's what it symbolizes. It symbolizes language. We all agree to that, but it symbolizes us as a species at that time in our life, our expression of as a collective group. Do you see what I'm saying? One is both. Okay, so so what happened to me with all of these, right, okay. Right, okay. Well, I wanted to give people a chance to come over, but I will go and swap that. What channel am I on now? This is, okay, so Joan, I did put it on the right one. Okay. You guys are so silly. All right, I'll end that one and leave it. Okay. That's what, that's still, so there, it's still there. Okay, that's what I didn't do. Hey, mass hole. Okay. All right, so I want to share, I want to switch my, I'm not going to be able to do it in that way. All right, so go back in time with me. I'm going to go back in time for a minute. And I'm going to read this right here. We'll all read it together. Okay, so remember our timeline. Oh yeah, there was something else I wanted to share with you first. Before I do this, I forgot. I had another dot to add right here about the golden age. Do I still have that tab? I wanted to read exactly what it says about that golden age. I'll pull it up real quick. Sorry, I wasn't prepared here. I did think about it, and then when I went live, I totally forgot to pull it up because I think this is all very relevant. Okay, go to my history. That is, yeah, okay. I think this one will work because it's not very, is this the one that's going to work? Hang on. No, right. It's not, because that's the one that doesn't say anything. Oh, how long is that one? Yeah, that one's going to shoot a monkey. All right. This guy was really good. So we're just going to bounce around. Okay. I think he had the transcripts. Yes. Okay. I'm on it now. Hang on. Okay. So let me swap streams here. Okay. So in history, we have what we know as the 4 ages of humanity, right? And you have the golden age, the silver age, the bronze age. Okay, you have these ages. I'll put the link to this stream. It's very interesting. This is another reason what I've come across here that has led me down this kinds of stuff in the first place. To re-look at it now and try to share it again in this way. So he talks about the golden age. So let me just see if I can get to that part. Okay, so we're talking about, so humanity is created, and then there's, oh, stop it. Right, okay. That's not it. All right. No, hang on. That wasn't the right part. All right. I'll start it right. Well, I'm just going to start it right here. So, yeah, because then it goes into a little bit about the golden race. Now, when you're listening to it, what I want you to do is imagine your children. Imagine seeing, as if he's not describing man, but he's describing little children at the golden age, you know, when they're babies and all of their needs are met and everything. This is your beginnings of your development in the big scheme of things. That's what we're talking about. This is creation here, the golden child, or do you see all the gold? Come on, there's so much symbolism there. Okay. So this is the age of, this is how humans as a collective or as an evolutionary stage, we're in the golden age, much like a baby being taken care of by mother, what we describe the Garden of Eden. So I'll play this and think of that in what he's saying.
So humanity is created, and then there's the golden age, and then humanity all dies, and then humanity is created again, and there's the silver age of the second creation, and then that all dies, and then we have the bronze age, and we have a third creation, and then that all dies, and then we have the heroic age and the fourth creation, and then that all dies, and then we have the final creation in the iron age, and then hasn't died yet, but he says when it will die. So we're in a sense, we're almost talking about different creations, different attempts by the gods at creating humanity. We're going to be reading from Hesiod's Works and Days, in translation by Evelyn White, 1920. I'm going to provide a link to a full translation of this work in the description so you can read through it if you like. It's not very long. I will warn you, though, it is not very interesting on the whole. It opens up with some mythological content. You have Prometheus, like mythology. It might be worth taking a look at. So we'll begin with the Golden Age. And I'm going to just read to you exactly what Hesiod has written, as translated, of course. Then we'll talk about it a little bit. First of all, the deathless gods who dwell on Olympus made a golden race of mortal men who lived in the time of Cronus, when he was reigning in heaven. And they lived like gods, without sorrow of heart, remote and free from toil and grief. Miserable age rested not on them, but with legs and arms never failing, they made merry with feasting beyond the reach of all evils. When they died, it was as though they were overcome with sleep, and they had all good things. For the fruitful earth, unforced, bare them fruit abundantly and without stint. They dwelt in ease and peace upon their lands with many good things, rich in flocks, and loved by the blessed gods. This is the Golden Age. This is the first initial creation of humanity under the Titans. This is before the Titanomachy, when Zeus takes over. A couple of key points here is this is during the reign of Cronus. It is peaceful, and we're going to see this a lot in Ovid. We're going to see a lot of emphasis on peace, but not just peace, lawless peace. But I don't want to get ahead of myself and talk too much about Ovid. It's peaceful, free from work and toil, long life, and no aging. People do die, but they don't age, and they live for a long time. And then when they do die, they go peacefully in their sleep. So we're still mortals. Interestingly, though, we're mortals cohabitating with the gods. There's not this clear separation, aside from perhaps our mortality, between humans and the gods.
Okay, let me just stop here. So when I hear him, what I hear him saying is he's describing a baby. That is absolutely exactly how a baby's life is. And you could debate, you could go, well, Joni, he says you don't age, babies clearly age. Yes, but not in the way we do, because babies are sleeping and awaking and sleeping and awaking, and they're not aware of these things. Therefore, our earlier myths about these stories would have come from that type of a mind frame. It would have come from the mind of a baby who's completely, all my needs are met. So when I'm reading these things as myths or as stories or as religions or as facts, depending on who you ask, I'm saying you're forgetting that it is from the perspective of a newborn baby and not a literal baby, right? It's not a literal God. These are stories that are coming from stages we had as we were growing up. And since we don't know how to explain them any other way yet, because I'm not in high school or college and I don't know how to explain the human body, I explain them in these ways. And that's where these myths and gods and everything start from. I'm starting here with these I want to show these patterns really clearly. So they live in the time of Kronos, when he was reigning from heaven, and they lived like gods without sorrow in their heart, and they were remote and free from the toil of grief. And I mean, think about what we do with our babies. So we're protecting them. They don't understand why you do get what I'm saying. This is just a story explaining a developmental stage that we have and how we are treated during that stage by not only our parents, but possibly the universe, in the sense that How much awareness do you have? I mean, wouldn't it be a plausible thing that in the great design, having no awareness in the early stages of life was beneficial on account of it's the most dangerous part of our lives, as everyone knows. And then talking about them just falling asleep makes me think of the concepts we have with like SIDS and these types of things where babies just pass, right? So it's these kinds of ideas that I think are coming from these, these actual events and a way to share them. Hey, Jerry. You said the age of Cronus, interesting considering the previous few years. Tell us more. Okay, and becoming civilized. Well, I'm going to get to that. So then they go on to talk about, I'm going to keep playing it because he's going to keep saying really interesting things. So I'm going to go back to right here so imagine this is if you were a baby, right? And think of this is what being a baby would feel like if you were to write it in words. Okay, if you were going to turn a baby's experience at life in the beginning into a poem, how would you explain that? And this is exactly what I hear. So I'll go back here and play it from this point.
I'll talk too much about Ovid. It's peaceful, free from work and toil, long life and no aging. People do die, but they don't age, and they live for a long time. And then when they do die, they go peacefully in their sleep. So we're still mortals. Interestingly, though, we're mortals cohabitating with the gods. There's not this clear separation aside from perhaps our mortality between humans and the gods at the time. We don't get tired. We don't have to farm or anything like that. Food is just there for us. For the fruitful earth, unforced, bear them fruit abundantly and without stint. So agriculture isn't a thing yet. There's no work. Now this, to me,
That's like a
and I'm
nursing
certainly
mother.
not the only one to draw this parallel, this is very Eden-like. Now, one thing that I find particularly interesting about it is how it ends. So we have the good times, right? And they're obviously not going to last forever, so they have to come to an end. What we see in the Hebrew creation narrative is that it ends in a sense because of us, right? We end it. We eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that's what brings the whole Garden of Eden thing to a close.
Okay, so we're talking about, the beginning, the Garden of Eden being the golden age or the baby that in the other slide that I have where I show that. I can't flip back and forth because I don't have that capability, or I haven't figured that out without making it very difficult. But we're talking about in our ancient times where we would have had this baby archetype, this baby behavior happening on a macro micro scale, and the golden age of that. And then we're moving into the movement of a baby. So the next thing that happens after the baby's needs are all met and it's in the Garden of Eden, it starts eating table food. It's when it starts to sit up and it becomes three-dimensional that it eats outside of its mother's breast, or the Sophia Earth or Mother Earth, whatever your Kool-Aid is. I don't care what it is. But God, the Garden of Eden, but that is a representation or an external written account of what a breast is to a newborn baby. And then it starts to eat from the food of the tables of the gods. Or, as I like to look at it, they get to sit at the big person table. They're sitting now. And so they're not wrapped up and cocooned against mother, they're sitting. And you can imagine they're in your laps even, or however, they're sitting at the table of the gods, or what a baby would consider the gods being all of the very large, loud adults with a lot of the same characteristics that we see attributed to our very gods through mythology. Do you see what I'm saying now? That's a good way, Well, that's what I'm saying, Masshole. That is, of course, you're getting a little too out there as far as reality. I'm talking about a fairy tale-esque idea there, masshole. But the baby stage being that's the most dangerous stage of a human's life, is that golden age. So I'm thinking, why I wouldn't want to put awareness there. I wouldn't want to put okay, in this algorithm or this mathematical equation I'm building that is going to equal human, I don't want to put awareness too soon. If I put awareness too soon, I'm going to fuck things up. So I don't have this program start until we've reached a certain stage. And of course, awareness just builds on top of each other. I think that's what it's talking about there. Okay. And it's good to see you, William. I have a stream that I'm going to make public just for you. I mean, it's for everyone, but your video made me think of it. And so I did that. And then I have another one I'm going to go and find for you about the astronaut that became a treasure hunter. Since I'd mentioned it and a few people said they didn't know they'd never heard of that before, I thought, oh, okay. So I'm just going to share some articles about that. Nothing major, just think it's interesting. Okay, and then and so then it goes on to the other stages. So then we get into the silver age, and when you listen, you start to hear these things. Okay. And then we get to the silver age of humans. So I'll play this now. This is going to take you not from the newborn. This is taking you into a sitting baby, the silver age with the silver rattle and the silver spoon in their mouth. Do you see what I mean? It's a representation of a sitting. I'd wonder what it might be in alchemy. I'm sure there's probably some kind of compound somewhere that's got some symbolism or whatever. But this marks the third dimensional sitting up of a baby here. And so we're going to look at this from that perspective. Do you see what I'm saying?
Anyway, then we get into the creation of the Silver Age humans. Then they who dwell on Olympus made a second generation, which was of silver, and less noble by far. It was like the golden race, neither in body nor in spirit. A child was brought up at his good mother's side 100 years, an utter simpleton, playing childishly in his own home. But when they were full grown, and were come to the full measure of their prime, they lived only a little time, and that in sorrow because of their foolishness, for they could not keep from sinning and from wronging one another. Nor would they serve the immortals, or sacrifice on the holy altars of the blessed ones, as it is right for men to do wherever they dwell. Then Zeus, son of Cronus, was angry and put them away, because they would not give honor to the blessed god.
That's so freaking beautiful. And you see there, now think about sitting babies. Have you ever seen them together? They could be so perfect and cute, but you sit them next to another baby and they start clawing them, pulling their hair, grabbing them, taking toys from their hands. This is the movement that becomes, and they have no consideration. The baby at this age has no concept of what it is to hurt. That's why this is the age where parents used to bite them back or scratch them back or pull their hair back. This is the time that they start doing these things because they're completely unaware of these things. And it's very dangerous because they're climbing on things, falling off things, grabbing for things, and it brings a lot of sorrow to the mothers. Do you see? And so that's what this age is talking about. Now we're about to come up to where God is. So I'm making my way there. Haven't forgotten the title of this stream. So that's what I hear here in this. And, they can't. Nothing can keep them from sinning and wrongdoing each other. They're going to bite each other. They can't help it. It's nothing you can do. And they certainly aren't going to sacrifice or give away their cookie. Now, we keep thinking that kids are copying. How do you think that? Do you think that kids are taught about space, or do you think that they're taught about space at a time their mind is open to space? And that's what we're talking about here. That's what our dear Catherine the Great brought us, was understanding children where they are to sell a narrative for us, to get them indoctrinated. But the indoctrination isn't forced. It comes naturally based off of, like a direct energy weapon, the very vulnerabilities that are available to them during that stage of development. That's why they want all the babies in daycare centers, because in daycare centers, we're removing a major part of their developmental stage. The younger. So that's what I hear here. And I find that so drippy and beautiful. Okay. So now I'm going to go. Then we get into the Bronze Age. I think you get the pattern. Do you see? Put a 1 or a middle finger, or, say, I get it. I don't give a fuck, in the chat that says you get what I'm saying. Otherwise, would you like me to continue with the other stages through the bronze or do you get that these patterns are the same per stage of development? Or do I need to clarify that better? And while I'm asking, I'll pull up the other picture so you can see it. So this is what I'm saying here, that you see we get the baby sitting. This is the age of, this is the golden age here. And we moved through to the Bronze Age, which is where we bronze our first pair of baby shoes, where we walk and become mobile, right? And that marks that age. So our behaviors during that age are going to be very similar to the behaviors that we have, as well as the human being that is of that age. Okay, so that gets us into ancient times, or where our understanding of God comes from. That's in the 12 to 18 month range. Now, what's going on in the 12 to 18 month range in a baby? This is where they start the idea of their preposition. I think that's how you say it. I'm probably wrong, or proposition. It's where they recognize themselves in space and time, and they have full use of their body, and their travel is still limited to our known environment. And as you can see, when we're coming out of those iron ages, this is roughly around the time that we're going to start having Jesus and stuff show up in that area. And as you can see, that it fits real nice there, because we have the census and all in that story. I don't even want to debate whether or not Jesus exists. That is irrelevant. The story's relevant, though. The story tells me. Do you see what I'm saying? I remember in college, when I was taking my Old Testament class, they were talking about the importance of the symbols of the sandals and the washing of the feet, and sleeping on the roofs and things like that. And so these were all really important at the time. And now when I look at it like this, I see so much of that there, those symbolisms of why they found it at the time as a collective group of humans, that they found also these to be the sandals and washing of feet. That's the time of walking. That's the time of learning to walk. That's our beginning stages of walking. And so for it to be in our history as a huge dot of understanding the world around us, I find that really interesting as well. This is also the time that we disconnect from parents. So what is Jesus but a note of disconnection from parents? So these kinds of ideas here, putting objects together, I find real interesting here, because that includes building of obelisks, pyramids. It also includes putting 2 sticks together to make a cross, or 2 fingers together to make an X. It's the age that we put objects together. Do you see that? I find that really interesting. And our languages form and we become empires. Do you see how that's really interesting? And so first we have the babbling, and then eventually the language forms. And of course, at the end of that, we've got fairy tales and mythologies from these departments, where fables, whereas mythologies tend to go into the earlier stage with the Zeus, and then we end with princesses and kings and queens and knights and shining armor and all that shit, right? You can't take my freedom. You end up with all of these Robin Hoods and things like that. That's all, Tolkien type ideas coming in there as we move into the modern era or preschool times, where we have different things happening. And we saw that that's where we believe in magic. That's where we believe in the Santa Claus. That's where and that's where we're going to look and focus now, right here at the 3-year-old mark, where we start to understand God as being something outside ourselves. So we've gone through all of this history and practicing it in our ancient times, and this is the age where it becomes solidified. Do you see? And of course, that's the rising of the church, as you can see it there. It's very visible. We won! And all of your massive beliefs that we now still practice today just rise right out of this area on the timeline map. So I find that very interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to my other screen so that I can share this about the development of faith through our epochs as a collective species. So we're going to go back to, I'm going to go back to 0 to 2 years. And now some of these names, if you've been paying attention, you will notice, and I do have this individually uploaded or on there. So, bear with me while I read through it again, but with commentary. If you saw it, if you haven't, then don't go listen, because you're going to hear it here. So from 0 to 2 years. Now remember on our little historical timeline map thing where we're talking about that. We have a universal faith. Now, these are based off of Erickson's trust versus mistrust. So Erik Erikson is going to, and Piaget, 2 names you should know if you've listened to me long enough, because these are the 2 people that I referenced when creating the meaning of life in the first place. And so they're the ones most everyone agrees with, had the best ideas of how children learn. And as you'll see, we're in one of the other articles where a lot of people pull pull their reference from. Okay. So 0 to 2 years, and this is the golden era. In their helplessness, infants and young children must depend on older children or adults to do everything for them. Erickson noted that young children are treated in a trustworthy fashion, then they will learn to trust. If their needs are not met, or if they're ridiculed or abused, they will lack trust. So this is a very important stage, 0 to 2 years. Do you hear what's happening right here? This is being created. Trustworthiness, just based off of the availability that the adults. So if you put your kid in a daycare center at 6 weeks or 4 weeks old, and they're now having to share the space with 10 other babies and 3 teachers, that kid's needs are not going to be met in a way that, say, another child who has one-on-one adult interaction. Do you see? That creates an untrustworthy adult. And now you can see what those untrustworthy children are acting like, because you can look outside or go on TikTok and find them. They're everywhere right now. Remember, we've been sticking our kids in daycare centers for a couple generations now. So we have already, due to the uptick in children being in daycare centers, we have changed their behavior from learning to be trustworthy to learning to be not to be trust. They have a lack of trust. And you can see its outcomes right here. Well, shame on them, because Erickson had already pointed this out a very long time ago. So, so Fowler, this is articles written from James Fowler, off of James Fowler, who was influenced by. Fowler believes that young children whose needs are met in a reliable way develop faith in those around them. Extending this to the divine, he proposes that children learn about God through the words and, more important, the actions of the closest to them. So why do we have a world that doesn't believe in God anymore? I don't know. Both were, or is desperate to find one, right? Both words and actions play a major role in the young child's nascent ideas about God. If trustworthy people speak about God with reverence, even young children associate or the word or the sound God with something special. More important, if adults and older children act as if this God is special, young children assimilate certain behaviors associated with the divine, such as folding their hands in prayer or bowing one's head. On the other hand, young children who see that trustworthy adults lack a high regard for God, using the name of God in anger when swearing, as an example, will likely emanate such behavior and develop a careless attitude towards God. And I think that we see that happening en masse. Children who perceive a high opinion of God in adults who are not trustworthy may be confused as to what this God is all about or how much on the side of the young children God might be. This is especially true for a child who is abused by a significant adult who tells the child that God is on the abuser's side or that God doesn't like children. So if you have a parent, the cops are going to get you, kids grow up thinking that the cops are bad. That's another example of that. And I remember that going around when I was younger, having friends whose parents say, you better behave or the cops will get you. And then them having a fear of cops, Oh, what are you guys talking about over there? Okay, I'll be waiting to hear that later on. Hey, crazy lady. Happy you're here. Okay. So this is where we get these ideas of creating a world in the future. So now we move to the next group of years, and that's our preschool years. And so in the meaning of life, the preschool years is 2 to 5. Now that's going to be ending ancient times, and this is preschool years is the year of fairy tales. So where we get our kings and queens and these types of stories and fables, that's the medieval times, the dragons, this all comes from the preschool stage in historical times. This comes from the preschool years, and that is imagination or the fairy tale era of our lives. That's why preschoolers love stories about once upon a time there was a little girl who was a princess named, whatever your daughter's name is, Tiffany or whatever her name is, Sarah, Susie. Okay. And they love these ideas. And so, of course, a lot of our stories from that timeline and history includes these things. Children are not emulating fairy tales. Fairy tales emulated children. Do you see what I'm saying? We've got to switch that and reverse that around. You can't say that, again, I'm going to use the space. Kids are interested in space, therefore space is taught, not the other way around. Okay, so in our preschool years, we have an intuitive and a projective faith. Now, this is really interesting here. So think about a preschooler and then think about our ancient times or our fairy tale times, okay? So based in part on PJ's pre-operational stage of learning. And I'd said in the other thing, if you've never read any of these things, go read them. Go read PJ's pre-occupational stage of learning. Go read Eric Erickson's, learn what they're talking about. It'll help you. So PJ noted that preschoolers have a vivid imagination, and for them, anything is possible. Their ideas about the world are not logical in the adult sense of logic. The way they see a situation is not necessarily wrong, but it may be vastly different from the way older children and adults see it. Young children also may have hunches and intuitions about people, places, and things or situations that are sometimes uncannily accurate, even though they were not formally taught such insights. Okay, so I'm going to pause right here on this paragraph. This is why it is really important that we don't jump on crystal children and, these types of rainbow children and alien children or whatever fucking kind of crazy shit these people have come up with. Because that is a normal thing. If you notice in our stories, we have stories about, children that have healing powers and, maybe they're exploited by a Southern Baptist tent church that goes around and scams people. Maybe they see ghosts or they have a stigmata. They can talk to dead people. A lot of examples. I think we all get it. And that's because they see this type of a world. So when I go back and I'm listening to stories about my, preschool age history, and in the history books, they're trying to convince me of things that are fairy tales, I get very frustrated. And I had this idea one day because and then I'll look at chat for a minute. My daughter said something very interesting. I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again because it's relevant to why I'm talking about these things. She was a sitting aged baby. She was on the ground floor. She was above the stop sign. Our house was on a corner and she couldn't see out the window, but she could hear the vehicle stopping. And when the vehicle stopped and the vehicle went through the stop sign, she looks at me so excited and declares, "A big truck, Mama." A big truck. And I thought that was fucking brilliant. I just realized there live and in person that my daughter understands the concept of a God. That's what she did. And so that led me through my research. That's why I talk about the things I do. This is just one of the many, many things that have put me in a position where I see something or hear something and I go, holy shit, that's huge. That's our timeline of history. And if that's true, if that idea right there for her, recognizing that it's loud and it sounds like a truck. So it's not just a truck, but it's an actual big truck because it was loud. She put these things together. And in my mind, she had just created Zeus. And that's why we have them in our fairy tales. They're an outward expression. Daddy's big and loud and scary. Like the thunder is big and loud and scary. And therefore, I attribute the thunder to the father or the male or that particular. And then it becomes a reality, apparently, in 2024. And now I have people telling me that these actually exist. And I'm just thinking we're missing something here. So that's kind of where I am with that. Okay, let me see if you guys are saying anything interesting. No, share your links. Share if you don't have a spanner, raise your hand. Actually, you might have spanner powers. So I don't know if you do. You might have knighting powers. I'm just saying. But it sounds like you guys are having your own personal conversation. So fair. Okay. So and so when we have these things, these uncanny, we can take our kid and say, oh my God, they have a stigmata. They must be special. And we can exploit that. But maybe kids are just really still connected because it's my kind of understanding that, well, we're very connected. And it's only as we start to separate, which is where we get movement, being able to be left alone, that we have separation from mother. So that happens. Okay. So because they are limited repertoire of their life experiences, preschoolers often project onto novel people, things, or situations their understanding or previously encountered people, things, or events that are perceived similar. So they're going to project. That's why I said Zeus did not exist as a god. He was a person. And the stories projected these concepts onto them. They were told, the story was told of horse faces because these particular people to a child looked like they had the face of a horse. Oh my God, that looks like the storybook picture. That's Uncle Horsey Face. And then we end up with stories about Uncle Horsey Face. Do you see? It's not a real thing. It's an illusion there. It's a story we made up to explain the things that were happening through the expressions of. Now, if you want to argue, well, maybe then we made them up and then they became real. That's fair. We can do that later. Such projections can be positive, negative, or a neutral. And that's why we have a lot of the gods coming out the way that they do. And so here's a really good example of this. It says a preschooler who's never seen a fox, for example, spies one in the yard and says, it's a red dog. It's a big truck. Do you see? It's a red dog. Make an assumption that it's a fox because of the shape of its ears, its tails, its body, and its size. Using all the necessary information given to them to make a perceived assumption, and they possibly got it right. And this is a neutral projection there. It means that they're just guessing. It might not have been a big truck. It could have been just a loud car, but she happened to be right. And then, of course, that leads you to even bigger myths. So Fowler, using Piaget's observation, notes that young children have age-specific insights and intuitions about events, people, places, and things, and even God. So their age location, where they are in their understanding of the mind opening and growing and learning and understanding the world around it, it has unique insights and intuitions. And that means that since I know when those specific events are happening for a child, I can manipulate them. And moreover, they often project to help them make sense of the world and God as well. And young children project onto God the attributes of their own parents or their significant adults. And that's why we can have mean gods and loving gods. If a child's mother is furious when he fails to eat his vegetables, for example, he may believe that God is equally furious, even if the mother did not say so. If a parent does say that God is furious over a child's deed or failing to do so, the effect could be even more pronounced. And this is where you get people, begging for forgiveness and the ability to exploit their money by priests. Because during that timeline in our historical epoch, this is what we were understanding. And priests were taking massive advantage of that. Now, did they know? I don't know. That's for another debate altogether. But nonetheless, that is a big behavior we have naturally during that age when we're experiencing. And an extreme example is the abusive adult who tells a child the abuse is the child's fault. And that is that if the child had done something to deserve it and that the abuse is discovered, God would be angry at the child and punish the child rather than that of the abuser. And if you see that really good there in our mythologies, and in a lot of Bible comes right from God punishing the children who are doing wrong, right? Do you see that? And and even in the sense of, we'll say, like, the King David, I think it was, who had his best friend murdered so he could sleep with his wife, and the abuser is dead. The one that was being, do you see what I'm saying? He's the victim, is in trouble. The woman is in trouble, but the abuser God forgives him of his sins, because King David was taught that God is a loving God. Do you see? So that's how the story gets written. That's how we believe it. And then we end up abusing people and burning them at stake and wars and everything else because we have this mentality. If, on the other hand, a parent or other trusted adult repeatedly emphasizes that God continues to forgive and love people no matter what they do, the child will believe that God loves him and forgives him. And that's why I really like the Catholic Church, because I can just go in and say a few Hail Marys and God forgives me. And now I can go about my business until next week when I got to come in and confess it again. It was an interesting religion that popped up in the way of giving everyone kind of an out. As long as I've asked for forgiveness, this is what Christianity did for assholes and narcissists everywhere. As long as I go in and ask for forgiveness, all is forgiven. That's because that's what they're taught. And so they can accept their punishment, and then I'm forgiven. It doesn't matter that your victims, right, still got victimized. Okay, so before I go to the next one, okay, are you saying anything interesting? No. Well, I mean, you are, but you're saying things for yourself. Okay. I love how I have so much great audience participation. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so where are we now? So this is Joni Rotten's Meing of Life. I believe that we're hitting our rite of passage, or your 13th birthday, or your 12th birthday, your tween, your double digits are coming to a close, and you're going into your adolescent, or the last stage that is going to be your first quarter of your life, one whole quarter of your life. So when people say it's the end of the world, I say, you got to be kidding me. We have 3/4 of this fucking rodeo to go. We are not even close to the end of time yet. Okay, we are just now stepping out of school. That is just 1/4 of your life. You still got 3/4 left to live. So don't get so ahead of yourself. But this takes us into our modern times, our belief in Santa Claus. We should also discuss here, because that's, before I go in there, I want to talk about the evolution of magic on the developmental stage of the mind and religion. So magic holds no play, the universal space. I get a boob, that's magic, I'm full. That's magic. Okay, that's the basic understanding of magic. But now once we become a 3D and we're sitting up, we start questioning the world. We want to explore the world now. So peekaboo is the next thing. So peekaboo then becomes a sitting baby's, put your toy under the blanket. I pull the blanket up and the toy is gone. And the baby, oh, where'd the bear go? And the baby doesn't know where the bear goes. And they believe that it magically disappears. But at that same moment that that's happening, something else is happening in the mind, and the baby's peripheral is paying a lot of attention. And one day your baby just picks up the blanket and calls your bluff. They have a new understanding of the world. This is a very short moment in the timeline of mind development, but it shows and demonstrates the moment that the brain sees past the illusion and can start looking for an answer outside of what it thinks it visually sees. So it comes to recognize the pattern that just because something doesn't appear there, it actually is there. And that's where you get a lot of these gurus talking about such things. It stems from this moment in our developmental timeline, where I understand, dogs display it oftentimes. You can throw a stick and the dog will run after the stick. But if you do that too many times, the dog starts to question whether or not you threw the stick. So you might have a dog that won't run right away until you show an empty hand, and then the dog takes off. I've seen that before. And the same thing with the baby. So maybe they open the blanket. The next time, it's not in your hand. You remember doing those tricks with your grandpa or your dad or something, and he would hide a coin in his hand, and you pick a hand and he'd open it and be nothing. And your next response is to look in the other hand, and it's not in there either. And then they have a dumb look. So the first look is, oh, it's not in there. It must be in here. And then when it's not in there, they have a dumbfounded look. They're not quite sure. And then it comes out from behind your ear and they're like, oh, how did he do that? But it's only a very short amount of time later that he recognizes that you must have it, in your sleeve or in your fingers or something. And then they try to work out the trick. And if they're really curious about it, they'll want you to teach it to them. Typically that, grandpa does. So this is the understanding of how mind in magic starts to work. And so what religion did was, religion and our belief systems, rather that be by design God or rather that be by design man, it used that as a gate, as a key, as a doorway into our development of religion. So would I say I believe it was a natural occurrence for us to have religion? It would have been an absolute natural way. Jesus, mythology, fairy tales, every single bit of that would have been completely natural. We don't act out knights and princesses first. We had knight and prince. We acted the cowboys out first before we played cowboys and Indians. That behavior was in us long before we learned to emulate it. We already did it. So that tells me that developmental concept of princesses was already in the program. Do you see what I mean? If you like The Matrix, there's a good place to look at that. Okay. Yes, the retractable thumb trick. My granddad did it and used to baffle me. Or when they'd pinch your nose and say, they have your thumb. That's right. I wanted my nose back. Exactly. Hey, Edwin. Delusionist. Yeah. Disillusionment. Exactly. So that's these are remember those times. Okay. So I'm glad that you're following along. Okay, so this is why Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, the Boogeyman, why these are very easy to express during these times, during this preschool years. That's moving you up to about 6 years old, from about, 2 to 6. I think I'm more that likes preschool sitting at 4 to 6, but I know some people would say 3 to 6, but I think 3-year-olds are not old. I don't see them as preschoolers. I think that's an odd year or a building year anyway. So to me, that's building up to a preschooler. So it would be the stage of leaving toddler, mastering running, mastering manipulating of things, mastering. And then by 4, they're actually able to start practicing these things, like pouring their own milk and tying their own, learning to tie their own shoes, or at least put on their own shoes. At 4, they're able to dress themselves. They can fully take care of themselves by this point. So I like preschool as showing up at 4 for those reasons. So we'll say 4 to 6 being the preschool years. Okay. And that would be a 4-year-old to, say, the typical first grader. Or 6-year-old. What would that be? A first year, I think is what it would be called. Okay. So, and if I put that as by modern times, coming to an end with airplanes, modern times being, so preschool being the world's fairs, preschools being, anything that when we went from coliseums to kingdoms, I'll say. I thought was real interesting too. This is just an off thought, because ancient times in my mind always brings, the idea of starting at Egypt and then ending once we transition into the next castles and kingdoms type stage of our development. But I was thinking the other day about, just this morning, I was thinking about the the elites. Now I would say something really kind of sci-fi, so let me get myself in a zone, since it's just us friends and it is an open thought rambling of the things I think of. When I think about things mimicking each other, and it's really just a matter of how you look at it. So you might not see it, but I see it. Do you not see this similarity? So I was thinking about like ancient pharaohs being buried with their servants and their animals and food. And then I was thinking, oh my, because I'm just going to pretend, I'm super rich, and I know that a lot of people aren't going to like me when they find out that I've been, basically poisoning them. So, or lying to them or stealing from them or whatever crime I've committed. And I'm going to need to, lock myself in my underground bunker for, I don't know, 300 years. Maybe they won't remember by then. Whatever your sci-fi story goes. I'm locking myself down there with, in fact, all of my crew. So if you think Elon Musk is shutting the door on himself? No, he's got a chef down there. They have the guy, and that takes me back to that time that I saw the interview about the underground bunker and that guy, Steve or whatever his name was, that was working at Subway. And they said, "What do you think, Steve? What would happen to you? What would you do if they just locked the door where you were down here and it was your shift?" And he'd say, "I'd be the luckiest Subway worker alive," or along those lines. And I've thought about that comment, because to me, I thought, man, that's how you look at it. You think you were lucky. I was thinking you're going to be working at Subway for forever, because they're not going to promote you anytime soon. You're not going to get promoted from sandwich maker to astrophysicist. What are you thinking? You're going to retire, just walk around in your jumpsuit? You're going to have to work every day at Subway. What if you decide you don't want to work at Subway? You'd think you're just going to be able to say, "I don't want to work at Subway." And what are they going to let you out? It's burning out there. They're not going to open the door. You're fucking working for Subway. I've got some supplements that'll help you, make you want to work for Subway. In fact, that's okay. Maybe you want to go in here to the sleep chamber and we'll put you to sleep on the holodeck. And then we'll just get a robot to take your place making Subway sandwiches. Anyway, I'm thinking that they really are mimicking the pharaohs. Do you see what I mean? And they're deciding who wins and loses, just like a good pharaoh dealer, as I've learned through the game Pharaoh of the Wild West. Crazy thinking about these things. Hmm. Pretending to catch invisible apples in the paper bag. It landed every time and I couldn't see it. He used to flick the bottom of the paper bag. Excellent. I love it. But eventually you knew. You're not saying today, "My grandfather could make apples land into a paper bag, and then when I'd look, they'd be gone. He was wasn't a god or something." We all figure it out. We all grow out of it. So I'm really concerned with a society that's still trying to convince me their grandfather was catching invisible apples. It's as if they want to bring their crazy fairy tales into my reality, telling me I can slip through wormholes and bizarre things. No, I don't think so. Okay. Yeah, Fallout. Okay. All right. So if we're that age now, and we're going through our rite of passage, which takes us to this stage right here. And oh yeah, I was talking about the magic. So yeah, we did that. And then also the other thing that I wanted to talk about in the understanding of developmental of things is our fear. So this 0 to 2 stage, or this early, we have universal faith. This is also the fear of annihilation. It just is the conquering the fear of death altogether, of even making it to the next round. So the fear of annihilation is getting over this initial scary part of our lives that every species is the most vulnerable. If you can conquer that fear, in other words, make it to the next stage, then the next fear that you have is the fear of body mutilation and body invasion. And that takes place in your toddling years, which is what this in-between zone would be. So our toddler years being our ancient times, this is, poking each other with sticks on things, it's all of your, Moloch, human sacrifice. It's these types of things. That's where you're going to get the toddler years coming out of that area there. So just think about a toddler and that timeline and see what similarities you can pull out from the way they thought about things, to the way they acted about things, to the stories and beliefs that came out of those things. The fear of body mutilation and body invasion. So we were invading each other and we were mutilating each other. If we can get through that, that takes us into our preschool years, which is more of our modern years. And in this stage, our fear is the fear or the loss of autonomy. So a preschooler and a school age or late elementary, these two stages have the fear of the loss of autonomy. And you can see that through our Kings and Kingdoms, we have lots of stories about being bound, even being blindfolded. That includes things like Hi-Ho Silver and, so forth and so on. And all of those things, masked, bandits and masked men and so forth and so on, wearing hoods, the loss of autonomy. We want autonomy, so we would wear hoods, but yet we all want to be in a group. You can see where it's all there. So it's practicing that fear. It's conquering that fear. And that's why you'll see bits of it, seeping out into the stories that were told about those times. Just the whole idea that every fairy tale starts out with some princess being locked in a tower somewhere. That right there is an expression of the loss of autonomy, not having freedoms there, being forced into marriages and so forth and so on. The loss of freedom, the loss of the freedom to move about, to be me. Okay. So that shows up in our preschool and our early elementary school years. That's very important when processing if we don't get this, so if we all survived annihilation. So we've all conquered that fear. Okay. If you have a fear of dying, maybe, I'm sure there's some kind of fear of that, but overall, if you're still here, you've conquered it. And then, if you can go outside and not be freaked out by bugs and things, in other words, it's not debilitating, then you've conquered the fear of being, body mutilation and body invasion. And then if you can, stand up to the bully, if you can say no to the abuser, if you can have your rebellious moment, then you've conquered your next fear, which is the loss of autonomy, right? And that's the bully, the one that won't let me walk through the hall, the one that won't let me take this path home from school, the one that, blocks me by my locker. They corner you. You see, this is a lot of, we tied him to a stake and burned him alive. I mean, it's a lot of bondage. That's everything from that time period to me is loss of autonomy. And that's what we're coming out of, is we're coming into the next stage, which is the fear of being alienated. That's adolescence. The fear of being unliked, not listened to, being invisible, these types of concepts. And so we see a lot of that because we have a lot of people going, look at me. They're afraid of being invisible. We have a lot of people who are, debatable just out of the gate. They're what's the word I'm looking for? They're in a stance of defense, consistently. They haven't conquered their fear of loss of autonomy yet. They're still afraid of it. And therefore they take these stances. You can see them everywhere. They take a stance of anybody who becomes a defensive they have no idea who they are. So if you see them becoming defensive in a way where they're going to continue to play ball in a defensive way, my defense is fuck off. That's my defense. I might defend myself, but to some degree, I'm not going to sit here and have an argument with an idiot. I don't have to defend my shit. So you can kindly go on. But those that are in there and sitting in that and constantly feeling the need to do that, anytime someone says something, even if it's in an agreement with them, that's the funny thing. I see so many channels arguing with people in agreement with them. That person is very immature. And if you're looking to them for any type of spiritual guidance at all, go look somewhere else. They hadn't figured it out yet. So, so I'll read this next one. Okay. So this is where I see we are now. This is, and if you notice, this is this is also where we start to understand empathy. So early to mid elementary school years, this is the age of empathy. This is the age of fairness. What's fair? What's not fair? And this is where we started to see our justice systems showing up. We started going for somebody to be a mediator to us. Did you see that? Through our ancient times, this becomes a thing right here when we're experiencing our elementary school years. Do you not find that interesting as I do? I mean, I just see this as so helpful to me, right? There it is, our preschool years now. I know the pictures are off. They're just, I can only pick one picture, so I just pick one that somewhat represents to give everyone a somewhat idea of the transitions between the stages. Okay, so you know that's not all that happened, but it's a representation of a lot of what happened. Edwin says, they, I get what you're saying there. So he would line up the bag. Almost as if he was catching the apples from a juggler. Would that be? Mm-hmm. Nukes, knives, and chopsticks. I spent third grade in the winter of 62 and 63 at school practicing duck and cover and school evacuation in fear of a nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Right. The bugs and insects fear stayed well into my 20s. In fact, still have issues. That's okay. We all have our things. And if you ever wanted, identify, I find studying your fears to be fascinating. I have a phobia of ants, and I've broken that down. I can't help it. If I see an ant, I instantly start sweating. My heart rate goes up. I have an event that happened that caused me to get to this point, but have unlocked what I believe the true fear stems from. And although that they give me a moment of pause, I can still kill them motherfuckers like ain't nobody's business, right? It's not debilitating in the sense that I can't, what is it? Enact my revenge. Oh, I'll be back with the hose and some poison any minute now. That's how I used to come back with the ant piles. Jay's got an apple for the teacher because he's the teacher's pet. Oh, were you a suck up, Jason? Were you checking out? Yes, it was like the juggler. I love it because I see juggling very much a dot. The gesture, joke teller, juggler, circus performer, entertainment archetype is strong. And so we can't leave them out. The mime. I could talk an hour just about the concepts of the mime and why it's a thing, where it shows up in our timeline and history, and exactly why it shows up there. Because it's a developmental stage of the mind. The mind created the character because the character is the collective. Only to me. Okay. If it has 100 legs or 1,000 legs. Ooh, that'd be interesting to note that you are specific with legged things. I like it. Crazy. Okay. Which was the home to the B. Oh, yes. Robins Air Force Base. That's in Florida, isn't it, Edwin? Or South Georgia? Is that South Georgia? Robins. Warner Robins, is that right? Because the one, what's the one? I don't think that was the name of the one I went to, but it was Dobbins. Is that it? I don't know now. I know that's a name, but for all I know, that could be a base in Arizona or something. I don't remember. Nonetheless. Okay. Are you, is this cool? Do you like this stuff? Go back to my other, that's it. Okay, so that's the one I'd been to. Yeah, Warner. Okay, that's the one. So Dobbins must be in Arizona or somewhere else. Dobbins, maybe it is around here. I don't know, but yeah, I've been to that one. Then the Warren Robins. That was an interesting trip. Okay. Right. So our elementary school years, so now we've understood our fear. Our fear here is standing up to the bully. So if we don't accomplish this fear by the time we reach our teen years, we're screwed. So I like to use this as an example. If you haven't defeated the bully by 13, you're going to be shoved in lockers the rest of your high school experience. You're going to have to find a way to say no. And that could be a bully at school, or that could be a parent, that could be an authority figure. It doesn't matter what that expression is to you. All of them are equal. But this is the age that we have a rite of passage, or we come into ourselves. And when we're thinking about the development of God, this is where these kinds of ideas start being questioned. They have a logical mind. So they're thinking, they're trying to find the answers to why your thumb disappears. And here's where we start to get this. This is where they'll start to question whether or not Santa Claus makes sense. They'll notice the wrapping paper is the same that you wrapped somebody else's gift in, and you'll laugh about it. Oh, Santa must like the same wrapping paper, or, oh, Santa left it here or something. You'll have to come up with some excuse. He left a roll and I used it. But it's that they start to notice these little dots. They start to see things in their peripheral and start to wander. So this right here, we have a mythical, literal faith. This is where I see the majority of humans being currently. So when I describe this, I want you to think about the population at large. And then I'll move into the next one, and you can see how old you are. Just think about, how old are you? So based on PJ's concrete operations and Erickson's industry versus inferiority. So those are both things that you should look up if you're interested. Those are papers on or thoughts on. PJ noted that children in the early years of elementary school must learn concrete tasks like how to count, to manipulate numbers, to spell, to print, to write, and so on. And now you know why in our ancient times, or in our historical timelines, epochs, ages, whatever it is, extinctions, they're all the same. These are some of the things that we have coming out of there: spells and math and alchemy and these types of things. And they're learning to spell, print, and write. Now, what did we have coming out of Rome and all of that during our crusades? Right? We had texts, myths, fables, Bibles, stories coming right out at the age that we are learning to manipulate numbers, to spell, to print, to write, and so on. Just happen to be that same stage. Are you following me along? What are the odds? I must only assume at this point that if you don't see the pattern, there's nothing left I can do for you. If they're to succeed in society, they have to do these things. They must master these skills. So it's necessary for the development of our species. Early elementary school reinforces and capitalizes on the concrete thinking of constantly drilling them in various skills, noting when they are wrong in an attempt and when they are right. And that's what Catherine the Great was doing, right? That's what schools do. They're capitalizing on the normal brain, the normal thing a baby does, a normal thing a child is doing, the way the brain is learning and understanding the world around it. School takes that right there and capitalizes on it. It even says that. And it capitalizes on their concrete thinking with constantly drilling them with various nuances like technology and big booties and divorce and drugs and crime and violence and, eating the right foods and yoga and whatever. I think you get the idea. Um, so Erickson observes that no matter how hard some children try and how industrious they are, however, they will never be the best. And that's where we get religion that pops in and says, don't worry, God's still working on you. He likes you just the way you are, right? This is going to lead into the next developmental stage where sex starts to play a much bigger role, because somebody who likes you and thinks you're the coolest thing since sliced bread suddenly starts to happen for you at a time where you're exactly questioning your place in the world. Notice a lot of times my experience has been, correct me if I'm wrong, or your experience has been different, but a lot of the men that I've known, or even women that I've known, that have had very unique, specific gifts and skills, delayed the opposite sex in a serious relationships. You hear a lot of it in business when they're, and even in truther channels that say, I choose to be single because if I'm with someone else, it's going to distract me from my message. And so that's kind of the same idea here. When we get into the next stage, which we're going to see happening here, we're looking for somebody that accepts us as we are. This is a very cult-like idea, and that's why we're going to have these cult-like continue to grow. And I even use that in the sense of protests and groups and ideas that we get behind. Are they wrong? No, but just know that the process is using something that is natural to your stage in development as a human species. The fact that you're a double-digit tweener and that your idea of an identity is being thrown on the table, and you're also open to someone who's going to accept you who you are and not judge you, makes you a perfect candidate. Do you see what I'm saying? The ducks agree. The ducks agree. They say, ooh, yes. I'm not doing a live long, Paul. I'm actually going to be ending this as soon as I am done with, my typical little hour and a half to 2 hour spiel. So we can all go listen to it together. I think that would be cool. So I see that playing out. I definitely see them using that. All right. So Erickson observes that no matter how hard some, right, because we're going into the fairness. Some children, they're just never the best. If they can excel in some area of their life, if they lack of ability in another area, is not usually so devastating. So maybe your kid isn't real good at, maybe they have dyslexia and they're not real good at reading, but they're an amazing artist or something like that. Maybe they're not real great at math, but they're really good at science. Or maybe they can play an instrument but struggle to read. Whatever it is, I'm using those as kind of dramatic expressions, but it can even be, maybe a child that's not very social and, is shy in its natural way it is. It's just one that's like that. Maybe dance or music or something could be a way for them to express that. If you notice, a lot of people that are in the public eye, comedians, actors, public speakers often say that they have, musicians often say that personally in their lives, they're scaredy cats when it comes to doing these things. But for some reason, they excel here. And so you can find a way to work within it. If in their best efforts attempts they never excel at anything, they'll feel inadequate or inferior. And I think we see that playing out en masse. We have large groups of people being told they're inadequate and inferior. Sorry, you've missed that train, so you're going to have to live in Silicon Valley in your car. There's too many, and so forth and so on. What can I do? I think that's why we're also seeing an uptick in nursing careers and the service industry, because people naturally are starting to feel inadequate or inferior, and they want a way to help people even if they're not capable of solving complex math problems. Do you see what I'm saying? Volunteering, protesting, these are all ways that are fighting your inadequate and inferior. I am a man. I am a human. I need to be heard. I'm not invisible, which is an adolescent fear. So their failure to excel strikes them as unfair. And here, I love this word because we hear this everywhere right now. That's not fair. You get to do that, but I can't. They can poison the water, but I can't smoke a blunt. They're allowed to spray in the skies, but I can't, whatever. I can't, whatever. I can't think right now, but you get the idea. It's not fair. There's clearly, I can't breathe outside without getting a ticket or whatever, however ridiculous thing that might be for you. Everyone knows that the world is unfair right now. All of these guys are, possibly having sex with young girls, and, it's unfair. They're not going to jail. And if I jaywalk, I get a fucking ticket. That's really unfair. Do you see what I mean? So the whole world is looking at unfair. It's unfair you labeled me as a woman when I'm clearly a man, or as a man when I'm clearly a woman. It's unfair that you are bringing these people into my town I don't want here. It's unfair that you can do tax fraud and I can't. The whole world is unfair. So I can't help but think that we are in fact right here at 12 years old, where everything seems unfair. The first rebellion that is of our own making, our first rebellion, the toddler rebellion where we had Jesus, that's just us challenging the world around us. That's knocking over tables and saying this isn't right. I want that candy bar. It's temper tantrums. But when we reach this rebellion, it's with thought. We start seeing the unjust and the unfair. I think that's why the Jesus and Buddha and all of that was really important, because they were bringing to light the next stage as we were moving into it. And so the story concepts behind them is an opening of what's right, what's fair, what's humane, and all of this. And that's why we get a lot of laws coming out of those rules, if you will, the 10 Commandments, even so much as the Bill of Rights. These all come out of the early elementary years, remember, from one end to the other, where we're having that transition of what is fair and what isn't fair, and who has rights and who doesn't have rights. That's a mid-elementary and early to mid, it because your kid has put their foot down. That's not fair that you get to stay up and I don't. It's not fair that you get to watch TV and I don't, right? It's not fair you get to go and I don't. And so that's very much important during that age. And it's really unfair if I'm keeping my end of the bargain, right? So pray, do your this, do your that. If you just believe. And they're working or studying so hard and they just can't. They just can't do it. And fairness is highly important concept to these school-age children. It's highly important. And we saw it expressing itself through our history and currently today as we're reaching a boiling pot here. So in terms of faith development, children of this age love myths, stories, and beings larger than life who deal with human basic concerns. And there's your stories of our historicals coming out. The most beloved myths are the ones in which being good, a person or an animal, triumphs over evil, right? Think Dora the Explorer, even with Swiper the Fox. And then, of course, ending with, say, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Because children of this age are very concrete in their thinking, they want to hear the story exactly as it was told or written and no variations. Hence, elementary school age children love stories from their faith's traditions, sacred scriptures, and the more astounding the story, the better. For these children, these stories not only are possible, but they are plausible. Their faith is as certain as the grasp of the alphabet. Unless they're exposed to questioning or doubting adults or older siblings, children do not question or doubt at this age. It is what it is, and that comes later. And that's where we're heading. So in terms of their relationship with God, this is where we're ending. Humans as a collective, we're ending in our late elementary, 12 years old. So in terms of our relationship with God, we expect God to be fair to us. For example, if they are good, or if they pray, so if we are good and if we do our prayers, then we expect good things to happen. That's what we hear with the law of manifestation and the law of attraction. If I do good, good will come my way, right? And just as they would, do unto other, but this is really a lot of the karma discussion that we're having. Just as they would expect friends to treat them well if they treat their friends well. Golden rule. And God is a friend and a very powerful one at that. So our government, being God here, is a friend and a very powerful one at that. It's a small wonder that children feel cheated when the government, when they've tried so hard and paid their taxes and all of that, that they don't get what they most want, their freedom. This is especially true if they are ill and they pray to get better, but they don't get better, or if they pray to have friends, but they don't get any. So now we move to our current state of things. So if I haven't decided that that is unfair, that bully keeps bullying the play yard, it's unfair that I can't walk through this fucking hall to get to my goddamn locker because you're a dirtbag who stands in the way and spits on me when I walk by. Well, I have a few choices now, don't I? I can choose to go another route, which takes longer. Or I can, choose to, get in a fight with them. Or I can choose to just walk through them. I have choices to make here. So you're standing up to the bully is where this kind of idea comes from. Think your coming of age moments where you go out and, fight the wolf and come back with the wolf, wearing the wolf is your rite of passage. They do this in every culture and in every, tribe and every belief. There is a rite of passage. I think it's interesting that in the Jewish faith, the Shemitah is being used right now, 777, which I've always heard was God's number. And that is a rite of passage or bar mitzvah. Are you going out to defeat your enemy? It's the determination of a man standing up for what's right, or proving himself worthy against the largest foe. It's David and Goliath kind of stuff here. And remember the age of David in David and Goliath. That should give you a clue as well. So here's what I see happening, is that we haven't even come close to deciding which bully we want to stand up to. So I don't know how this is going to go down. But here is how our faith understanding works out during the preteen and early adolescence. So we're talking 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 years old. Okay. That's the age here. They have a synthetic conventional faith. And this is what the world's going to experience if I'm right. So this is going to happen en masse. Based on PJ's formal operation stage and Erickson's identity versus role diffusion. As children approach adolescence, they begin to acquire the ability to think abstractly, to think about things that they have never experienced, and to put themselves in others' places. And that's why we have such a large humanitarian movement as well, putting yourself in their shoes. Piaget calls this development formal operations. Children this age are also beginning to process of separating themselves from their parents. This is a second separation as well. We had the first separation of the capsule when we started to walk and move. Again, first rebellion. Second rebellion, we have a second separation from parents. Children begin the process of separating from their parents and building an identity that goes beyond being someone's son or daughter. I am a dancer. I am, whatever. I'm a good bike rider. I'm a fast runner. If you sat down and asked kids of that age to label themselves, these are the kind of things that they would say. To do this, they try on different roles to see how these roles suit them in Erickson's stage of identity versus role diffusion. And so, again, I want to point out that's a very current behavior right now. People trying on all different things. We tried on lots of different diets. We tried on lots of different technologies. We've tried on lots of different game systems. We've tried on lots of different roles. In terms of faith, young people at this age are in transition between the earlier stages of certainty. Remember, we believed God was God. We believed that these faiths were sound, and it says that we're transitioning between that stage of certainty. It is what it is. There is a Santa, there is a Jesus, and one that encompasses greater ambiguity. The conventional part of this stage is the aspect of these young people that is still attracted to the concrete, certain element of their faith, whereas the synthetic aspect acknowledges that different people believe different things. And so we get this idea of lots of belief systems and the cults, and these are all expressions oozing out of this type of a behavior on mass levels. For example, a young teen encounters someone whose beliefs about God are very different from hers and yet is a truly good person. Or a preteen sees that someone who shares the same religious domination as his parents lives outside that faith tradition in a very different way. These young people begin to synthesize many ideas based on what they see or experience, and in the process, many questions arise. Whose faith tradition is right, for example, and how do we know for sure? And these are questions in which the adults also struggle. So that is where I see kind of our humanity as a whole heading, and I see these things happening. We're all looking at every faith. In fact, we're going back to faiths we haven't unlocked before. We are making up ancient texts. We're listening to people who saw aliens and wrote books, and we're calling them facts. I mean, I see so much in this transitional stage in synthesizing to try to figure it out that, it's a bit on the scary side. But this happens. So maybe you think more like this, right? And this happens in your mid to late adolescence. This is how we start to view the world when we're 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 to 21. So you can look there. 15 to 21 would be your mid, late adolescence. It depends on if you like a 666 for an 18 or you like a 777 for a 21. They're both the same. Also based on Piaget's formal operations and Erickson's identity versus role diffusion, as they develop beyond the synthetic conventional stage of faith, adolescents begin to wonder what they themselves believe now. And that's me. I am questioning, what do I believe? These people have told me a lot of crap in the past, and I've thought about it, and I'm not so sure. And that's the Joni Rotten open thought thinking. Not what their families believe, not what they once believed in the past. Although family and friends can support them in their search, it is an individual task that requires much reflection. So, one of the things about the rite of passage that happens when we turn 12 is that we have a near death experience, or we're supposed to, right? And so we come back. Most people that have near death experiences talk about having much reflection and an understanding about themselves. So I would imagine that these rites of passages were in fact designed for that purpose. And of course, since we made them up in the first place, they're a natural part of our developmental stage. Typically, this is the stage during which young people stop attending services in their own faith tradition and begin attending other services. And I read about that in another article that's up on the channel about the Jewish faith. And this, from this perspective, I'm trying to give every perspective I can here. And they saying, don't worry about your son if he doesn't want his bar mitzvah. This is absolutely normal because of this. They'll stop attending your services of their own faith or begin attending other services. Although some say that they're atheists or agnostics, most are neither. I remember so many of my friends in high school saying they didn't believe in God, etc. Surveys of adolescents indicate that the majority are believers. They do believe in something, but they do have questions as they ponder the world that they will inherit. One of the things that's real interesting about adolescence too is that adolescence, now you think not necessarily think this, but in reality, it's this transitional stage of these double-digit numbers that kids start to imagine the idea that they had superpowers, that they could chant a love spell, or that they could, bind someone or create some type of spell. And again, that shows up in our ancient times, and that they actually can control them. Okay. So that's prevalent there. And then, we grow out of that as we get to be an adult. So typically, 33-year-old, women aren't, imagining that they can perform, some type of love spell by writing, I love, Steve in their notebook in swirly letters. And somehow that's going to transfer to him across the row. But that's what that idea is. So typically, at this stage during which young people stop attending, I said that. Okay, here we go. But they do have questions they ponder about the world they will inherit. They wonder what kind of God permits such suffering on such large scales, especially of innocent people. Are we not seeing that en masse? That's a behavior of a child that I'm claiming to be roughly the same age we are as a collective. Do you see that happening? They also wonder why there is so much evil in the world. Aha! Well, that's an interesting coinky-dink, because it seems like the whole world as a collective is also wondering why there is so much evil in the world. They must completely examine all the tenets of their faith that they hold so dear and come to a new understanding of their beliefs and a new sense of meaning, the meing of life. The process is neither brief nor painless, because we all know high school sucks ass. For some young people, this stage does not occur until adulthood. For others, it begins in adolescence and can last years, maybe even decades, before you learn to stand up to the dragon or the bully that has its hold over you. So that's my presentation. I think that was pretty good. I know, that's just me. I'm just going to do it that way. I don't know any other way to do it. Hello, Rich. So it's good to have you here. And yes, I see some people leaving. That's fair. I'm done anyway. We'll all go over to the link. We'll find that. One thing my dad taught me from an early age is there is no fairness in the world. He had a saying, but it would be deemed racist today, I'm sure. Ulix says, I'm convinced. And he's out. Don't turn around now. There's a song in that. All right. And father and son are reunited. And Vinny pops in for a peeky poo. Hello. Okay, yeah, thanks for that. What is that four-sided paper game? Yeah, that's the one. I think of that all the time too, Rich. And you're like, how I say you, it's got numbers on it. So if it was you that I was macking on in school, my girlfriend would say, "What's his name? What's his name?" And I would say, "Oh, it's Rich Spillman." And she'd go, "Rich, RICH." And then she would do it. She would remember and open it up. We used to twist apple stems too, and whatever letter the apple stem popped off of, that was the name of the husband you were going to marry. Do you remember that? Anyway. Okay. Let me do a couple things real quick before I let everyone go. I want to pull up the that link and see what everyone's going to be talking about, and then I'll look forward to seeing what everyone's comments are in the chat. Okay, so Rich, you have been knighted. Welcome back. We had to move kingdom locations, so everyone is getting, their robes again. I've got new robes. Don't get excited. All right, and then the link. Let me go find it here. Thank you, Paul. Oh, it's live in like 30 minutes too. So that's awesome. Copy the link. Yeah. So we've got like 30 minutes. She loves me. That's right. Yay. I remember the girls, they did like those. Excellent. Yeah, so I'll end this one. I've been uploading some things on I just read the article that I was just reading, but I read it without my extra commentary. Some other things. I also have a few other recordings and as I find the interesting things, I will continue to present them to you. So much love to everybody. Yes. Okay, I think that's it. We'll go over there. We can all have a little break, get something to eat, and we can meet over there in that other channel later. And I don't know if William, if you're going live, tell us all when you're going live, and anyone else that, throw all that stuff in there, and I'll just play the bounce out song while we do that. And that concludes my Let's Start with God, Meing of Life philosophy stream presentation today. Love you guys. Oh, maybe I'll play this one instead. No, I'll play the bounce out.
This public service announcement is brought to you by Rotten Studios. Remember, no contact is the road to freedom.